On December 2nd, there was a strike on security forces in Chechnya. Kadyrov's forces, the armed forces of Ukraine, attacked the Akhmat base in Achkhoy-Martan. An explosion occurred in the local FSB building. The Kremlin and Kadyrov are in panic, and there is a blackout in the Moscow region. Dozens of homes are without electricity, water, and heat.
Yes, the car is without lights. No, wait, it's not on. And here there isn't a single one at all. Unbelievable. I honestly don't understand a damn thing. And
the south of Russia is on fire. Explosions in Tuapse, Crimea, Feodosia, attacks on oil refineries in the Black Sea, and a new Russian tanker has been hit. This night is one of the most alarming. They're hitting oil refineries and the nerves of Kadyrov's power structure. Breaking news, friends. December 2nd, and new explosions in Chechnya. Last night, for the first time in a long while, the armed forces of Ukraine launched direct strikes against security forces. Ramzan Kadyrov's forces. In Gudermes, the base of the Akhmat regiment was blown up. This is his personal power base, Ramzan Kadyrov's. In Achkhoy-Martan, the FSB building was damaged. This is sensational. It operates in conjunction with Kadyrov's special units. Locals are talking about a series of large explosions and a fire. Kadyrov's public channels are in a panic. The security block was hit in 2 districts at once. And this is already the second strike on Chechnya in the past few weeks. At the same time, there's a blackout in the Moscow suburbs. Dozens of homes without electricity, elevators not working, houses without light or heat.
there's absolutely no light at all within this entire house. No, wait, something is definitely burning brightly over there in the distance, a flickering glow. But right here, in my immediate surroundings, there is absolutely nothing, not even a faint glimmer. I truly don't comprehend a single thing about what's happening. It's utterly perplexing, and I can't make sense of any of it.
In the south, new explosions in Tuapse, in occupied Crimea and Feodosia, attacks on oil refineries in Oryol and Krasnodar Krai.
I'm shocked. Look, it's going off. Damn, thank God, fuck, in my opinion, it hit. See, that's already, you see the chemicals are burning. See, it's blazing. It just hit me, about the videos, I was thinking, yeah.
And in the Black Sea, there's something new. Already a new strike on a Russian tanker on December 2nd. The night showed that not only the regions, but also Ramzan Kadyrov's power vertical itself came under pressure. The Kremlin is in panic. We'll discuss all this with the President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, Ruslan Kutayev, right now.
There was an attack and a hit on the Ministry of Defense on the military base in Kankala. And that's very important. That's where the S-400 and S-300 are located. That's where the leadership of the Russian FSB for the Chechen Republic is based. Their families, the Ministry of Defense, it's a separate military town. And this is the command center, essentially, over the Chechen Republic. We will wait with great hope, wait for Budanov to send his envoys to Kankala as well. The Chechen Republic has always been militarized. There is a huge number of units packed in there, all stacked on top of each other. And of course, they need to be hit with everything we've got. But we should start with Kankala. Kankala needs to be hit so hard that nothing but a wet spot remains.
A series of explosions occurred in Grozny. A Chechen Interior Ministry military unit was blown up and the roof of the barracks collapsed. This is all the work of the armed forces of Ukraine. Administrative buildings are on fire. Units of the National Guard came under attack. Akhmat, Sever. Explosions were heard in several districts of the city at once. This is one of the most painful attacks on Kadyrov's security forces during the entire war. Greetings to you. What was blown up and how do you assess the scale of the strike on the Interior Ministry's military compound?
Dasha, greetings to you. Yes, there is information that they struck units in the city of Grozny and National Guard units in the Shatoysky district, in the village of Borzoy. This is a high mountain village, Borzoy. There are a lot of troops there. An entire brigade is stationed there. And finally, we see that Ukrainian drones, if you remember earlier, these strikes, I used to say there were strikes from Mozdok and FSB provocations, But today I can say with enough certainty that these were Ukrainian drones that made it there. Why? Because there is no danger to the civilian population here. These are strikes on the armed forces. These are strikes on, let's say, on the soldiers, on the barracks, on the locations, on the buildings of the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of the National Guard. And that's why I'm sure that these strikes were carried out by the Ukrainian side. This is a new chapter that's opening now.
Sanfarik, how serious is this? What kind of damage? First of all, for Ramzan Kadyrov, for the Ministry of Internal Affairs. How large scale was the strike, according to your information as of today?
I do not have any information, at least for now. I can confidently say that today or tomorrow there will be data fairly accurate about who was killed and who was hit. What is very important to me, first and foremost, is that the civilian population was not harmed and civilian facilities were not damaged. And these strikes were carried out specifically against those forces that are currently the opposing side to Ukraine. And therefore, I think first and foremost, this shows that Ukraine's capabilities are expanding. They are already starting to operate more broadly, more precisely. And the fact that in Borzoi, in the highlands, well, not exactly high mountains, but mountainous terrain, a strike was carried out in the Eyawel, in the mountain village. And this also has some symbolic significance.
If we now return to Grozny, how painful is this specifically for Ramzan Kadyrov? A strike on the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Can this be considered an attack on his security center and on his personal power structure carried out by the armed forces of Ukraine?
Of course, without any shadow of a doubt, this unequivocally indicates that they were utterly unable to adequately protect their own military units. This profoundly shows that the devastating war is now inexorably coming to this very region, that the brutal war is indeed coming and causing immense and irreparable damage to the very people he has been diligently and seriously protecting for so long, specifically not allowing them to go to the front lines of the war, and that the relentless war has now tragically come directly to their own homes, their personal sanctuaries. This is exceptionally important from the critical point of view that they cannot be effectively protected, even while merely staying safely at home within the confines of their own secure units, which is a truly alarming development. That's the perspective here. It is of great significance.
How will the situation change within the Chechen security forces after such a strike? Because seriously, the barracks were on fire, the roof collapsed, and there was a detonation on the territory of the Akhmat North Regiment specifically.
Well, nothing will change here because no fewer people are brought back dead from there, from the front lines, though there is a bit of a difference. The overwhelming majority of them are people who were forced there against their will and thrown forward. But here perhaps it does have significance. These people who were attacked last night are those who are part of the regular troops. These are Kadyrov's people, the ones he doesn't send to the front lines. These are the people who ensure his safety, the security of his regime, the security of his power. From this point of view, of course, damage has been done, including reputational losses. I think now they will be reinforcing themselves specifically with missile defense and air defense systems, if that's enough for them. But with Kadyrov's resources, I think he will manage. If such systems exist anywhere in Russia, he will definitely use them to protect his facilities. That includes his own home, his administration, and also the mayor's offices. There are a lot of different ones there. There are many people there who, from their own perspective, consider themselves highly important, let's say high-level individuals. That's their own opinion. And in order to maintain this image, this special status they've assigned themselves, they need to ensure its security. From this point of view, I think they will now be making efforts to establish an air defense and missile defense system.
This is not the first time this has happened, actually. Drones regularly breach Chechnya's air defense, and now the strike hit the most heavily guarded part of the city, the infrastructure of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the National Guard. In other words, to be specific. Two sites, the National Guard military compound in the Balsangurov district of Grozny and a facility in the Shatoy district. According to residents, there were a huge number of explosions, a series of strikes, fires, and lots of movement and equipment. Shlan Kamdevich, what is the current state of the Akhmat Sever regiment of the National Guard? And so, the motorized rifle regiment, the floor is yours. But
this is the National Guard. This is a National Guard unit, and it has its own particularities and differences. Unlike, as we know, Zolotov heads the National Guard of the Russian Federation. Kadyrov and Zolotov are the closest pillars. They are Putin's main supports. These are two people who are very close to Putin and have his trust. And in the territory of the Chechen Republic, it was not Zolotov who formed these units, but exclusively Kadyrov. He alone selected the command staff and he can replace them. And this is very close-knit. This is Kadyrov's army. This is Kadyrov's force. There are a great many of them indeed, and that's precisely why I firmly believe that striking directly at the National Guard, specifically within the Chechen Republic, is essentially striking at Ramzan Kadyrov's very own personal army. This particular point is incredibly important and it is profoundly significant.
Slava Ivanovich, in your opinion, is this attack some kind of signal to the Kremlin and personally to Putin, or is it exclusively a blow against Ramzan Kadyrov?
I think equally so. This will be painful not only for Kadyrov, but also for Putin. Because these units, among other things, are the very units that will be responsible for ensuring Putin's security at our X in Moscow. They will be transferred to Moscow. Not, wearing some kind of, let's say, mountain attire. They will be in the uniform of the National Guard. They are official units. The National Guard, but these are the units that Kadyrov formed, nurtured, and raised, and they are especially close to him. That is, for example, along the perimeter of the Kremlin walls. It is precisely these most trusted people who are stationed there. Because Putin doesn't trust the FSB, nor the Russian community, nor Russian patriots. He trusts these people. And striking them is also a strike against Putin's own security.
This is a very important point. Ramzan Kadyrov's private army has grown several times over since the start of Russia's large-scale invasion. All open sources and opposition media report this. By how much and by how many times has this army increased? And as of today, is this now Putin's private army? I'm interested in your analysis.
I think Kadyrov himself has mentioned this number. At one point it was 50, then 70,000. I don't think this is just a play on words. In reality, as the war gained momentum, and indeed the war was intensifying, though not now, there was a time of escalation in 2024. The biggest escalation was when Russia tried to break through Ukraine's defenses. At that time, when they were recruiting people, I think Kadyrov kept half or a third, or even more than a third of them for himself. And this was to reinforce his personal army because of the people he mobilized for the war to send to the front lines in Ukraine, to the Ukrainian front. He kept some for himself this way. But this is not his improvisation. This is coordinated with Putin. Putin understands that the time will come when he will need to defend himself, his loved ones, and his power in Moscow. And that's why Kadyrov's army has a special role and special significance in the life of the Russian authorities.
We've noticed that there are currently some migrant riots happening in Moscow. Next, the FSB joins forces with the National Guard to attack, accordingly, migrants in major Russian cities, including Moscow and St. Petersburg. The arrests of migrants are carried out jointly by the FSB and the National Guard. Taking into account the current marches of Russian nationalists, riots, and conflicts between war correspondents and Solovyov, for example. Also, the veterans of the special military operation, so-called. Obviously, they're terrorist murderers. Now they're also speaking out against Solovyov, a kind of snake pit situation. In your opinion, what is the current relationship between Kadyrov, the National Guard, and the FSB, given these kinds of turbulences in the center?
Here it's important to clearly understand the influence of the FSB on the National Guard. In the regions, it still remains, although there are still some conflict situations because the central office, the leadership of the Russian National Guard, is in conflict. Despite all this, the visible part of Russia's management structure is still intact. They are not openly fighting each other or entering into open conflict yet. They haven't done that yet, although the time will come and they will do that too. And that's why I think the FSB is primarily the one provoking these migrant riots, these acts of migrant disobedience. And how do they do it? They persecute them. They don't persecute them lawfully. They do it to agitate these migrants, to stir them up, specifically the National Guard and this conflict, so that, why is this being done? To leave Moscow unprotected. If there are conflicts in the regions and the National Guard is involved in these conflicts, then as a force for counteraction, or let's say for Putin's protection, they won't be available. They can't be available in Moscow. That's why the FSB creates various conflicts in the regions, so that to tie up the National Guard forces on the ground there so they can't quickly come to Moscow's aid and protect Putin. This is primarily why the nationalists behave the way they do. The nationalists in the region stir things up, persecute non-Russian peoples, Muslims, in order to scatter all the National Guard forces so that they can't be quickly mobilized in Moscow to protect Putin.
Alexander Vladimirovich, we know that in principle, European and American missiles are capable of striking Russian territory deep inside Russia. We have seen the ATAC-MS strikes, which had a certain effect among Russian war correspondents and Russian propagandists. We know that we now have ballistic drones. I won't shy away from using this word because today I heard for the first time the phrase that not ballistic missiles, but ballistic drones are being prepared. What is that? For now, this is something of an exclusive, but today I read this information. Our missiles, our drones, Flamingo. Now, what can be said about security in the region, meaning Chechnya, military facilities? How vulnerable is Grozny itself now, from the perspective of law enforcement and military facilities specifically?
Well, ballistic drones are drones with rocket engines. This development has indeed been underway, and most likely they have already been launched. This isn't a motorcycle moving at 60 kilometers per hour for a whole day, trying to get around these, finding ways to bypass missile and air defense systems. Here, they can reach their targets quite seriously and at high speed. And the most interesting part is that the warhead strike capability is increasing. This is very important. In general, I want to remind our viewers that essentially drones consist of three parts. There's the airframe, the warhead, optics for targeting, and there's the engine, which carries all of this. And with the advent of rocket engines in drones, things are speeding up so much that you can have, well, at least a long-range missile, and let's say 1.5 tons or even more, though a bit less with the warhead. This is one thing. And these rocket-type drones will have a very serious impact. Now, as for how much this changes the situation, it certainly does. In general, the emergence of this, even just in terms of time, if the other drone took a whole day to fly, this one does it in an hour. So processes intensify, they speed up. If it was a slow-moving drone, they could shoot at it with a machine gun, an automatic rifle, or a shotgun. Maybe you'd hit it, maybe you wouldn't. But with those carrying rocket engines and drones, excuse me, but here you need a special method of destruction, of shooting them down. And that's why, firstly, efficiency increases both in terms of the time it takes to deploy and in terms of the safety of the raids carried out by these drones. And so I think this too, along with other existing developing and applied guidance methods, by striking Russian territory, this will also help improve the situation.
You know Chechnya and its military facilities much better than many journalists and media representatives. Do you expect new attacks on Chechnya's security facilities? Absolutely, that's exactly what we're talking about. And in your opinion, which facilities are currently the most vulnerable?
I think so, yes, always in the best of times. The Chechen Republic has no fewer than 100,000 military personnel. That is, the Chechen Republic, the Chechen people have always been in a zone of, let's say, pressure. And it was solely because of distrust toward the Chechens that the army was kept there. If there are, say, 150,000 or 200,000 troops in the entire North Caucasus, then 100,000 of them are stationed exclusively in the Chechen Republic. That's why there are several divisions, 5 to 6 brigades, both of the National Guard and the Ministry of Defense. We still haven't heard what actually happened. There was an attack and a strike on the Ministry of Defense, on the military base in Kankala. And that's very important. I think now they will be targeting Kankala, and there are S-400 and S-300 systems stationed there. The leadership of the FSB of Russia for the Chechen Republic is also located there. Their families, the Ministry of Defense, it's a separate military town. And this command center is essentially over the Chechen Republic, and that's why we will wait with great hope that Budanov will eventually send his envoys to Kankala as well. This is very important. And that's why the Chechen Republic is always militarized. It's packed with a huge number of units, all stacked on top of each other. And of course, they need to be hit as hard as possible. But still, everything should start with Kankala, with Kankala. Kankala needs to be hit so hard that nothing but a wet spot remains of it.
Dear audience, please like this video and share your opinion about the strike in Grozny in the comments. And not just about our ballistic drones, but also about our new missiles, American and European missiles, and those of our partners that are flying deep into Russian territory. Friends, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Yes, be happy, and in the comments, let us know where you're watching from, your location. This is very valuable to us. Shalkangich, another very important topic, is how we are constantly attacking Russia. We are attacking Moscow in the Moscow region. There is a series of blackouts near Moscow. We are attacking the thermal power plants. We are attacking Sheskharis, the oil terminal at Novorossiysk. Novorossiysk itself destroying ships, large landing ships. The attacks are ongoing and very serious. Moreover, there are attacks on military airfields, including those where two 95 MS nuclear bombers are stationed. All of these events have literally happened in the last few days, which we are discussing with you now. And the attack on the oil refinery, including last night at the Novokubishevsk refinery in the Samara region, the largest Rosneft plant in the region, is ablaze with up to 10 explosions. How do you assess the work of the drone forces? Magyar, the security service of Ukraine, and Ukraine's armed forces. So I've just outlined for you, so to speak, the last 5 to 6 days, what has happened, what has been burning on Russian territory.
I want to say these are not the first strikes on the Novokubishevsk refinery. The roads have already been paved. The paths have been laid. They already know what they're doing. Indeed, Magyar is doing a great job. This is, without exaggeration, probably the best in the world, the most advanced drone army. And this person simply started, I want to remind our viewers, from the trenches. He rose up from there. He's not some staff officer. He's someone who created, improved, and strengthened everything with his own hands. He created units and expanded them. And that's why he knows he's an expert. In this field, there is no one more qualified in terms of experience and knowledge in this area of drone development. And that's precisely why I truly want to say, I think this is merely my assumption, but it's still firmly based on sound common sense. They are deliberately not attacking these thermal power plants yet, at least not until the cold really sets in. Not until the real frosts arrive. This can be done around New Year's, when the cold has truly set in. That's when these thermal power plants, whether they're boiler houses or a number of other facilities, should be targeted. And I have not the slightest doubt that all these sites are already accounted for and known. And the very best news. The Americans are transmitting detailed information to the Ukrainian side via satellite communication. They provide information about which roads have been laid, and say out of 28 or 56 units, I don't know exactly. Kirill Dmitriev, Putin, they may not have tried, but in principle, America continues to arm Ukraine with knowledge for attacks and strikes on Russian targets. And that's why I think it is reasonable to expect that the strikes will become more precise, more frequent, and more effective. Just as Russia does against the peaceful Ukrainian population. Civilians, I want our viewers to understand this, and I want to emphasize it. Ukrainians only attack military and semi-military targets. Civilian targets. Ukraine does not attack. Ukraine does not attack schools, hospitals, and so on down the list. There are no attacks anywhere. And that's why I think Ukraine will continue to improve in this area. Their expertise, they could be considered academics in any country today, including the United States, and could explain and demonstrate how this can be done in the best way possible.
Hamdich himself, a very important point, yes, is how we carry out our attacks. The largest oil terminals include, among others, Novorossiysk, Tuapse, and of course, Ust-Luga. How do you assess the recent mass strikes, which were carried out by the armed forces of Ukraine together with drone systems and special services?
This is very important. Ust-Luga is on the Baltic Sea. It is essentially used for transporting not only oil, but also oil products. In Novorossiysk, 30% of all exported oil and oil products are shipped from this port. And if anything, we want to remind you that the transportation of oil products, and these facilities are also being targeted. The transportation stations where these networks branch off in different directions are also being attacked. And from this point of view, this is reasonable behavior that will ultimately lead to the fact that even without sanctions, things will stop working within the Russian Federation itself. Let's say those energy projects that provide the money for Russia to successfully, at the very least, throw its manpower onto the front in Ukraine. And this manpower, let's say, was supplied and paid for with that money. And from this point of view, the behavior is correct, it is consistent and proper. I always say, it's not Trump imposing some kind of sanctions on Russia, but Budanov. It's Budanov who is imposing sanctions. He destroyed the service, that's it. Even if it's just for a few days, for a month, the port stops, oil shipments and so on are halted. And that's why, Dasha, I think this is very important, it's very good, and it's very effective. It works, it brings results.
Another very important topic is the United States of America. This is the sharp conclusion to our material today. There is an escalation of its own in the US. Just a few blocks from the White House, 2 National Guard soldiers ended up in critical condition after an armed attack. As I understand it, Trump wasn't in the city at the time, he wasn't at the White House, but all of this is primarily being seen as an attack on the authorities. The suspect is an Afghan citizen, he has been detained. The Department of Homeland Security is implementing measures and suspending the processing of all requests for entry from Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a key issue, especially considering it's, so to speak, just steps away from the White House. Another shootout, a dangerous escalation. Trump has already made a statement calling what happened an act of violence and hatred and has demanded a review of immigration policy. We will, of course, continue to monitor these fronts. Stammfomnik, how do you assess the situation? Because ever since Trump became president of the United States, there has been an enormous zone of turbulence there. Let's start with the fact that he was shot at even when he was running his election campaign. And now there's this kind of violence, protests, and so on. The floor is yours.
Look, Dasha, this is very important to understand. After all, today the Afghans who are in the United States of America are Afghans who cooperated with the Americans. They are Afghans whom the Americans brought with them on planes to the United States of America. And that's why right now they really can't and have no right to say that some Afghans came and are doing something there. These are Afghans whom the Americans, they recruited them in Afghanistan, worked with them, and then took them out together with themselves. That's the first point. Second, these Afghans who worked for America, who worked for the Department of Defense, for the CIA, for other American intelligence agencies, who can prove to me now that this agent, an Afghan by nationality, who worked for American intelligence agencies, isn't acting on the orders or instructions of some intelligence chief, didn't carry out this attack in order to change the agenda. Today in America, because the current established public agenda in the United States of America today does not genuinely favor Donald Trump. After all, Trump absolutely cannot change the deeply entrenched agenda regarding the infamous Epstein list, and he certainly cannot alter what is currently happening right now in the world. They got caught because of the list of 28 items. The Russians brought it, handed it to them, and no matter how much they tried to protest and prove that it was their own creation, everything has already been proven. Everyone knows, and both in Congress and in the Senate, they tell Trump and his administration, no, the Russians gave you this cheat sheet and you named it. It should be said, in all fairness, that Rubio, the Secretary of State, openly stated that this was not the work of the administration of the President of the United States of America. Trump has a lot of problems, but these appointees of his, starting with Patel, Gabe, Foreign Intelligence, the FBI, Patel, these people, as Americans say, are random individuals who have nothing to do with these agencies at all. They were specifically put there so they would be easy to control. And they will do everything Trump wants. Their authority, their generals' high ranks, the height of their positions are insufficient to persuade the skeptical civil public, the discerning American public, their overall impact and influence, the passing of Charlie Kirk, a notable figure. In general, as Americans say, this is an open challenge to American society. Charlie Kirk is not just an outsider, he is the person who brought President Trump to power. This is the platform where Trump's children were presented and where they introduced themselves. And this person close to them is being killed publicly, deliberately, in order to send a message. By the way, it's a message to Trump. After all, they didn't want to shoot or kill Trump at that time. They were warning him, if you make a move, we'll just adjust our aim a little to the right and blow your brains out. You see, that's what's going on here. That's why Trump is trying to change this behavior, the behavior of society. It won't work. Just a few days ago, I watched your show where you showed how Americans took to the streets, how they protest, and how huge the numbers are. Just imagine, those numbers will keep growing. The mayor of New York City, Mandani, was elected. Supposedly, Trump said, I'll crush him, I'll eat him alive. And what happened? When they met in the military cabinet at Trump's administration, Trump just sat there smiling at him. Yeah, go ahead, call me a fascist. He doesn't want to get into a conflict with him at all. Why? Because New York stands behind Mandani. Why? Yes, because Trump got into a conflict with society. Instead of him, instead of this Mandani socialist, it could have been someone else. They would have elected that person too. It's not so much love for Mandani as it is hatred for Trump, for his circle, for his party. That's why now, for example, even Marjoni, she officially left, she quit. After all, that was Trump's flag. She was a Trumpist to the core. When he was no longer president, she continued to serve him. And she left him, she walked away. This is an indication that the ship called Trump is sinking, going under. And he's trying to do anything he can to change the agenda. And I'll tell you one last thing about this. That's why they're starting or trying to start a little war in Venezuela. In general, for our viewers to understand, in the United States of America, the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of the government is measured by the prices of gasoline and diesel. That is, by the prices of petroleum products. If prices go up, the government is bad, can't do its job, and doesn't protect the interests of Americans. If prices go down, it means this president is effective and should stay in office. Prices have gone up. Both Trump and his sponsors, those who brought him to power and control him, they want at all costs to occupy Venezuela, to install a government they can control, so that by summer, or more precisely by late summer, by fall, in September, or at least August, the prices of petroleum products will be significantly lowered, so that in the upcoming midterm elections, the Republicans do not lose both the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America. When we clearly understand the set parameters of the authorities' behavior, when we clearly understand what they are trying to do and how to build our own behavioral strategy, then we know and can track their actions. And that's why Trump is losing, and he's frantically searching for a way out. And in this state, he could do a lot of unpredictable things.
Friends, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Together with the President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, we regularly appear on my YouTube channel to discuss current political and military events. Next week, Witkov will fly to Moscow, and together with Shlangdichi, we will definitely discuss this situation. On the same day, we'll meet and record a live stream. So friends, stay tuned. President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, Shlangdichi, thank you very much, and see you next week.
All the best. Take care.